Growing up, learning how to hunt and track were just day-to-day life skills. As a child, I loved going out camping with my parents, and all that training taught me a lot about living off the land. So much so that when I moved to the United States, I wound up becoming a wilderness guide. I love my job. There's something about seeing the world in its true form that speaks to me. About a year ago, I got completely hooked on those wilderness survival shows and decided I wanted to give it a try. So I grabbed my camera and made an audition reel thinking, what's the worst that could happen? To be honest, I didn't really think I would get picked, but 2 weeks after I sent in my audition tape, I received an email stating I had been chosen to participate in next month's filming. I was super excited by the idea of being on the show, and when they told me this episode would be filmed in Australia, I just knew I had this in the bag. The first day of filming, I was introduced to the cameraman who would be filming me for the entire event. His name was Andre. He would be filming me and was not allowed to help me in any way unless I chose to tap out of the challenge. The rules of the challenge are simple. There are no rules. If you come across another contestant, you are free to work with them if you choose to, but you are also free to raid camps and take what you need. It's survival of the fittest. Some contestants have been out here longer than others. If you make it past the 30 days, you get $5,000 and have the option of doubling your money by doing 60 days. If you opt to go for the 90 days, you could walk away with $50,000. If, by the grace of God, you make it that far, you can go for the 120 days, turning that 50,000 to 1 million. But no one's made it past 90 days. After a brief safety training session, I was outfitted with a mini microphone that looks like a pucker shell necklace and a small handheld camera. I was then given the option to pick 3 survival items. I chose a machete, a fire starter and a mosquito net. Once my items were chosen, they were taken from me. I was told they would be available to me once I reached the starting point for the challenge. I would be spending the next 30 days alone in an undisclosed location somewhere in Australia. As an added twist to the challenge, all contestants would be completely naked. I wasn't completely against the idea. I'm comfortable being naked. I just hoped the cameraman wasn't a perv. Once I was blindfolded, I was loaded into the transport truck and we were off. The drive there was a little nerve-wracking. I kept thinking about all the really dangerous creatures that live in the area. Flashbacks of my father being bitten by a spider and nearly dying raced through my mind. The threat of getting killed out here is real. When we arrived at the starting point, I took off the blindfold, then stripped down and started recording my intro. Getting undressed in front of the cameras and crew was possibly one of the most awkward moments I've ever experienced. My name is Gail Foster. I'm a 27-year-old survival guide living in Colorado, but I'm originally from right here in Australia. I'm here on the show to prove to myself that I can survive under the worst of conditions and to hopefully make my father proud. Dad, I love you and I'll see you in 30 days. After that, I grabbed my gear and headed off. My plan was simple. First, establish safe shelter and gather fire material. Second, locate fresh water a safe distance from my camp. And lastly, gather as much food as I can. But after the first 30 minutes of walking, something didn't seem right. The place was a lush, green, wild land. I've been all over Australia and I've never seen this place. Nothing about it looked familiar. It felt wrong. I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe I've just been gone too long, and kept going. The first 5 days were spotless. I built an awesome camp. I found an entire wild grove of medium berries. Life was good. Then, just before sunrise on the 6th morning, I was woken up by the sound of someone throwing stones at my shelter. I popped out thinking it might be a contestant, but it wasn't. It was a short, dark-skinned man with long, curly black hair. The bottom of his face was painted white, and the rest of his body was painted with tribal markings. He was a Kuku-Yalanji, a native tribe that's lived on these lands forever. From what I've been told, they are very peaceful people, but they can be somewhat territorial. He just stood there, not saying a word, staring at me for a few seconds before I heard something moving in the darkness behind me. The tribesman raised a finger to his lips to shush me, while motioning to me and the cameraman to get down. He said one word, Yowie, before taking off silently, vanishing into the forest. I stood there, frozen in place, slowly shifting my eyes from left to right, trying to spot the source of the movement, but I didn't see anything. The sound of a branch breaking somewhere behind me nearly made me jump out of my skin. I took off running. I tried to remember the direction the tribesmen went, but everything was happening so fast. I got lost. To be honest, I don't know how Andre does it. I ran a long way in the dark, and he kept up the entire time. I swear, he didn't miss a step. I spent a good part of the morning finding my way back to my camp. The second I got there, I gathered up my things and abandoned that location. I stayed moving north along the extraction route. I walked for hours, putting as much distance between me and whatever that was as possible. And by sunset, I had the foundation for my new camp. It's been 4 days since I started setting up here. Someone keeps taking my building supplies every time I go looking for food, so I haven't been able to finish my shelter. There's something wrong with this part of the woods. It's too quiet. I haven't heard or seen a single animal since I made camp. I've been going further out for the last 2 days, and I haven't found anything close to edible vegetation. I'm starving. I walked as far as I could today for nothing. Just another blank trip. I was on my way back to my new camp when I started hearing someone yelling, "Hey, you piece of shit, get back here!" I could hear something rushing towards me. I spun around in time to see an emaciated woman, covered in filth, running by clutching a nice-sized fish in her arms. Not far behind her was a tall, thin guy with a cameraman lagging behind him. When he saw me, he stopped and let the woman get away. "Well, hello there. The name's Jack. That's my cameraman, Eddie. And you are?" I had a bad feeling about this guy. Something about the look in his eyes bothered me. "I'm Gail. That's Andre. We're just passing through." Jack looked at the both of us and paused for a second, looking around. "Passing through, Where's your camp?" The tone of his voice instantly put me on guard. "Not far. Where's yours?" Jack smiled and looked at the both of us. "I'll make you a deal. If you help me catch that little thief, I'll show you my camp and give you some fish. Deal?" The idea of hunting that woman down didn't sit right with me, but after starving for the last 2 days, fresh fish sounded great. I was in. We followed her tracks for a good 10 minutes before we came to a clearing in the forest. And there she was. She looked almost feral, sitting on a downed tree, tearing into the fish. My first thoughts was, where is her cameraman? I looked over at Jack just as he threw a rock at the woman, striking her in the face, instantly drawing blood. She dropped the fish and screamed before running away. Jack chuckled to himself, then walked over to the mostly shredded fish laying on the ground. Damn it. The fish is no good now. The animals won't even eat it. What a waste. Well, I guess I have to hold up my end of the bargain. Let's get you that food. I was still shocked at what I had just seen. What the hell was that? Why did you do that? You could have just taken the fish from her. You didn't have to hurt her. Jack laughed and started walking away. "You really are new, aren't you? Do you want the fish or not?" As much as I didn't like what he had done, I really needed food. It was a 20-minute walk from where we were to Jack's camp on the beach. There's a reason I didn't set up camp on the beach. The water is way too dangerous. A prime example of that was the dozens of box jellyfish that were currently scattered all over the shoreline. Jack walked through the jellyfish minefield and pulled a bag made from mosquito netting out of the water. Inside of it were 2 nice-sized living fish. He came over, handing me the bag. Be careful out there. Rogues are bad news. I think they used to be contestants. Some of them are dressed like cameramen, but all of them are nuttier than a squirrel turd. Maybe it's just me, but I was having a hard time understanding what Jack was saying. I could understand the words, but he wasn't making any sense. What do you mean, rogues? Jack laughed and shook his head, like he felt sorry for me. What are you, about 10 or 15 days in? You have to be. You're the first new person I've seen in the last 2 weeks. I've been here 83 days now, and the rogues were here when I got here. I don't know a whole hell of a lot about them, but I can tell you they're dangerous. Jack walked over and took a seat on the rocks. I know something you don't know. His childish tone made me want to throat punch him, but his 83 days meant he could have some good tips. I took a deep breath and calmed myself. Can we just get on with it already? I want to get back before dark. Jack hopped off the rock, clapping his hands, then pointing to the sky. You're right on time. Oh yes, you're right on time. Tonight's the night, you know, when the sun drops and the world stops for the next 10 days, and things are gonna get weird, baby. You have to understand, Jack is about 6'6" and rail thin, with an overgrown dusty brown beard and unbelievably long hair. Seeing him acting like a madman was a little concerning. I didn't need to hear anything else. This guy was clearly insane. I thanked him for the fish and headed back to my camp. I could still hear him yelling about bears in the trees as I walked away. The sun was setting on another day. The smell of fresh fish roasting over an open flame was amazing. I sat there staring into the fire when a voice snapped me out of my daze. That had to be the craziest shit I've ever seen. I really hope you weren't listening to that whack job. I mean, seriously, 10 days with no sun. Production clearly needs to get that guy out of here. What the fuck is going on? I looked over to see Andre had put the camera down and was digging through his pack for a new battery. I'm not allowed to talk to you while we're recording, but this isn't right. That lady needs medical attention, and Jack needs to be removed from the challenge. I can't believe the sponsors are letting this show stay in production. I watched Andre dig through his pack for a few more seconds before it dawned on me. I could just tap out and go home. Screw the money, and Dad will just have to get over it. Hey, Andre! He stopped what he was doing and looked over at me. I'm done. I tap. I want to go home. He smiled and asked if I was sure. I told him I was. He put a new battery in the camera and told me we had to get it on film. Then he would radio it in. Once we were done recording, Andre grabbed the radio. Home base, this is camera 9. Contestant has opted out. I repeat, contestant has opted out. Request immediate extraction on my location. There was a long pause, and for a second I thought no one would respond. Then, with a burst of static, a voice came through loud and clear. Camera 9, this is home base. Extraction team won't be available till morning. Just sit tight, we'll see you at dawn. A wave of relief washed over me. The thought of being at home set my mind at ease for the rest of the night. We sat by the fire laughing and talking until we were both sleepy enough to try and get some rest. I crawled into my shelter, got comfortable, and drifted off in no time. I was dreaming about a Chicago-style deep dish and an ice-cold beer. when I was startled out of my sleep by the sound of someone moving around my camp. At first I thought it might be Andre coming to wake me up for the extraction, but that idea flew out the window the second I heard someone grunting. I moved slowly and peeked out of my shelter to see that woman Jack hit with a rock. She was squatting near the fire eating something. I couldn't see what she was gnawing on because her back was to me, but it sounded wet. Every few seconds she would stick whatever it was in the fire before taking another bite. The aroma was making me nauseous. It smelt like burning hair and bacon. I couldn't hold it. I gagged, and when I did, she turned to face me. The gash on her forehead looked infected. Her face was swollen to the point her eyes were almost closed. The wound was from her hairline to the bridge of her nose, and it was leaking almost thick, greenish-looking pus. That wasn't the worst part, though. What she was holding made me vomit. She was cooking and eating what looked like tongue. Not just a piece of tongue, the entire thing. Bearded human jawbone still attached. She screamed and backed away from me as fast as she could. The noise must have woken Andre because he came sprinting towards my camp only to freeze the second he spotted the feral woman. She screamed again and started backing towards the trees. She was almost gone when a rock about the size of a softball came zipping through the air, destroying her face with a loud, meaty thwack. She dropped instantly and went into convulsions. Before my brain could process what I was seeing, I hear a familiar voice yell out, "Oh, that had to hurt. Did you hear that shit?" It was Jack. He came proudly, swaggering out of the darkness, with his head held high, a huge smile stretched across his sunburnt face. "What up, guys and gals? Sorry for the intrusion, but I couldn't let it get away. The bitch killed my cameraman." He walked over and pulled his rock out of what was left of the rogue's face, then kicked her for good measure, before looking over at me still inside my shelter. "Why are you guys still sleeping? It's the middle of the day. Catnapping is a good way to get dead out here. You guys need to get with the program." The canopy of trees above us began rustling, and low guttural growls filled the air. "Shit, they're here. Run," Jack yelled as he took off running into the forest. Dark shapes descended from the treetops, slamming into the ground around us. One of them let out a throaty growl before charging into the light of my campfire. They resemble hairless koala bears, with an almost ape-like body and a mouth full of oversized fangs. I managed to scramble out of my shelter and bolt towards Andre as the biggest of them came rushing in, destroying everything in sight. These things aren't small. The big one had to be close to 200 pounds and absolutely ferocious. More of them came bounding down from the trees. They weren't as big as the main one, but all of them were horrifying. They went straight for the feral woman's body and began tearing it apart, devouring her flesh. The wet snapping of bones being obliterated echoed through the woods as Andre and I ran. The alpha let out a roar, and a few of the smaller ones immediately gave chase. Those little bastards are fast. They caught us up in no time. They were almost on top of us. I could hear them making a grunting sound as they closed in. The only thing keeping them from leaping on either of us were the trees. We were weaving through them, managing to keep those things off us, but we were running out of forest. The beach was coming up quick. There was no way we could outrun them on open ground, but stopping wasn't an option. My muscles were burning and my heart was pounding so hard I thought it would explode out of my chest. But the combination of fear and adrenaline made me push harder than I thought I could. The second my feet hit the sand, I made a hard right. My momentum took me close to the water's edge, but I was able to turn and sprint down the shore. I was running for a while before I realised those things weren't chasing me. I stopped and was trying to catch my breath when the sound of someone slow clapping grabbed my attention. I looked over to see Jack standing there with a big stupid smile on his face. "And that is why I don't live in the woods," Jack laughed and looked around. "Where's the other guy? Did they get him? The locals call them drop bears, but I call them growlers. Those little fuckers will eat you alive." I hadn't noticed that Andre never came out of the forest. I didn't see him go down, but I wasn't paying attention. I had no idea how we got split up. The sound of Jack clapping at me broke my train of thought. "Hey, wake up in there. We shouldn't be this close to the water right now. We need to go." Jack didn't waste another word. He turned around and started walking away. I took one last breath and then jogged to catch him up. We travelled along the shore in silence till we reached Jack's camp. When we got there, he rushed inside his hut and came back with 2 machetes and a torch. Jack passed one of the blades to me, then lit the torch using his campfire to ignite it. "I'm going to the caves. You can stay here if you want, but the Muljuank should be here soon. And believe me, you don't want that. They eat everything. They're the reason growlers won't leave the forest." Jack was already walking away. I took a few seconds looking back to see if maybe Andre would pop up, but he didn't. There was no way I was going to some cave with that lunatic, so I stayed by the fire. Jack's camp was well supplied with firewood and food. Staying there for the night seemed like the best plan. I eventually fell asleep at some point because the next thing I knew, I was startled awake by a low rumbling sound that shook the ground underneath me. The second my eyes opened, I saw it. The Muljuank was gigantic. Half of its body was still in the water. The half that was on the beach was humanoid. Its slick grey skin reeked of rotten fish and old seaweed. Its massive head seemed almost reptilian, with deep-set eyes that glowed a bluish green in the moonlight. The creature let out a roar as it slammed its enormous hand down, sending sand and rocks flying 10 feet in the air, spraying me with debris. I scrambled to my feet and started running. More of them were coming on shore as I sprinted down the beach, praying I would spot the cave Jack was talking about. As the cliffs near the end of the beach came into view, I spotted a dim orange glow flickering in the darkness. I was almost to the cave when something came crashing out of the forest. I didn't waste a second thinking about it. I kept running till I heard someone yell, "Wait!" I turned in time to see Andre stumbling out of the darkness covered in blood. As I started towards him, one of the smaller growlers came charging out of the forest. Before it could take 2 steps in our direction, a long black tentacle wrapped around it and snatched it into the air. The growler howled and yelped as it was pulled into the open mouth of one of those things that were coming out of the water. I grabbed Andre and headed into the cave. "Look who finally showed up. And you brought a dead guy with you. How wonderful." I helped Andre take a seat. "He's not dead, Jack, he's just hurt." Jack laughed. "Not yet. Give it a minute." I couldn't hold it anymore. "What the hell is wrong with you? We almost died out there, and you're acting like it's all fun and games. Why is this happening? And what in God's name are those things out there?" Jack threw another log on the fire, then looked me straight in the eyes and burst out laughing. "You're asking the wrong guy. I don't have a fucking clue what any of this is, but I do know we're not in Australia. Tell you what though, the one guy that knows exactly What's going on here is over there, bleeding to death by the fire. What did you call him? Oh yeah, Andre. Well, old Andre over there has been here at least 2 other times with 2 other people, both of which became Growler Chow within the first 6 days. So if you want to ask anybody some questions, it should be him. I'm not sure how long it was before Jack finally went to sleep. I sat there by the fire for a while till I started hearing a strange croaking sound. At first, it was low, barely audible. I wrote it off thinking maybe it was a frog or something like that, but after a few minutes, little pebbles started dropping down from the ceiling. I slowly glanced up towards the roof of the cave, and I was met by a pair of bright yellow eyes. That croaking sound bounced off the walls of the cave as a stubby, red-skinned, troll-looking creature dropped down, landing with a loud smack next to Andre. It was the strangest looking thing I have ever seen. Its oversized fish-like mouth was toothless and dripping drool as it opened wide and let out another croak. It had a mohawk of bristly brown hair that ran between its beady yellow eyes and down its back. The creature's arms were too long for its body. It dragged its knuckles across the floor as it moved. Its long, awkward-looking fingers were tipped with bulbous suction cups that stuck to the floor of the cave as it waddled around. It stopped and stared at me for a few seconds before moving towards Andre. I nearly jumped out of my skin when I heard Jack's voice whispering from behind me. Don't move. They won't bother you as long as you stay still. What is that thing, Jack? He moved up next to me. It's Yara. It's here for your pal over there. The creature waddled over to Andre and started running its fingers through his blood. We watched as the creature suctioned all of the blood off Andre's body with its fingertips. When it was done, it moved around to his feet and let out another croak as it opened its mouth. Its tongue shot out, wrapping around Andre's leg, and started pulling him in. Can't just sit here and watch this. We need to stop that thing. Before either of us could make a move, there was a loud, wet slur, and Andre's body was gone. The creature nearly doubled in size by having him in its mouth. The Yara bounced its now bloated body up and down while making a low grunting sound and patting its overstretched belly. Well, that's uncomfortable. I think we better get moving. Trust me, you really don't want to see what's next. The creature braced itself and started making a loud, retching sound as it opened its mouth and regurgitated Andre's body. He gasped for air and tried to scream, but all that came out was a wet, gurgling sound, and his skin started slowing off in big, bloody clumps. Oh, that's not right. We need to go. This is only going to get worse. Jack grabbed me by the arm and started pulling me away as the Yara plunged its hands into the melting mass of flesh. We eventually found our way out of the cave. What we came out to was a nightmare. Barren lands, nothing but dust, dirt and rocks. Where are we, Jack? He chuckled and started walking. Best place on earth. We looked up. You never know where those caves are going to spit you out. But we landed in tribal territory. We're safe here. Well, I'm safe here. You? Not so much. But if they like you, they'll invite you to stay. We better get moving though. Hunting parties don't take kindly to strangers on their land. We walked for what felt like miles until we found a group of tribesmen that agreed to take us in. We ate and drank while the tribe shared stories about this place. According to them, this place was sacred, and they were the protectors of the creatures we had encountered, the lost ones, or rogues, as Jack called them. Our contestants of the show that had been driven crazy by eating the flesh of the yowie. But when the contestants killed and ate one, they broke the link. Now, the tribe had to kill them all before the two worlds melded completely. It seemed like days went by. Staying with the tribe was amazing. They taught me things I never knew was possible. Before I knew it, they were telling us it was time for us to go. They led us back to the caves and guided us through. When we stepped out of the cave, the sun was rising over the ocean. I could hear helicopters in the air. Jack and I ran out to the beach and stayed there till the extraction team landed. When I told them what happened, they treated me like I was insane. According to them, it had only been 10 hours since they last made contact. They searched for Andre, but his body was never recovered. Since I opted out, I left empty-handed. But Jack was given another cameraman and went on to become the first contestant to ever complete the 120-day challenge. It's been over a year now, and I still have nightmares about that place. But yesterday, I got an email invitation. They want to recast me as a member of the redemption crew and send me back. The crazy part is, I'm thinking about going.